If you're a high performer looking to grow and make an impact, but feeling stuck, underappreciated, and burned out at work, you're in the right place. I'm Melissa Vining, and this is the Job Search for High Performing Misfits podcast. I help high performers leave draining jobs behind, reclaim their careers, and land roles in organizations where they can thrive. Tune in for tips, insights, and inspiration for your journey to fulfilling work that fits you. Welcome back to Job Search for High Performing Misfits. I am Melissa Vining. I am a certified resume writer and career coach. And today I am here with Dr. Mary Vining Radomski. And we are very excited to be talking about purpose, because a huge theme that we see right now in the career space is this idea of meaningful, purpose-driven work. Many people, and especially our listeners, really don't want to have a job just for a paycheck, but they want to feel a deeper sense of connection to their work. Mary is a retired occupational therapist and rehabilitation scientist, and her career has been all about helping people rediscover and reconnect with their purpose. She created and launched the Compass course, which is a framework that helps people renew their sense of purpose during major health and life transitions. And even in retirement, she continues to share her passion for purpose through her blog and newsletter, which is called Choosing Purpose. So Mary, thank you for being here.
Thank you, Melissa. I'm delighted.
Tell us a little bit more about your background and what led you into specializing in purpose.
I will tell you that my ability to focus my day job, truly, on purpose in life came towards the end of my career. And when I look back, I think of all of the eras that prepared me for that. And I think back to my lifelong interest in living a meaningful life, even though I didn't quite yet have a framework for understanding what that was. I was always seeking, like many people, to live a life that matters. Where the pivot towards purpose started for me was like the concurrent interest in purpose in my own life. As my own roles changed, my beautiful daughters had the nerve to grow up and get their own lives, which was kind of the invitation for me to do the same. But it really did. I was caught by surprise as how that role shift set me reeling. And at the same time, I had this rather inexplicable privilege of doing research with the military. And I spent time collecting data at military installations, which is just a crazy story in and of itself. But I would look at these young people and observe how intentional they were about their mission, regardless of what the daily tasks involved. And I wondered, how do they reset when they leave the military? How do they go from a highly focused, mission-centered daily operation to picking up the kids at daycare and running errands to Target? How does a person do that? So these were the things going through my mind a lot in my own life. And meanwhile, I was doing cancer rehabilitation research, and I remember one particular day, and it sounds kind of corny to say like there was a pivot day, but there was. We were doing a focus group with women who were on the other side of breast cancer. We were going around doing a round robin method, asking them about some education materials, something like that. I don't remember what the question was, but it came to this woman at the end of the table who looked like she had it all going on, and her voice cracked. And she said, "Everyone was so happy for me when I finished my treatment for cancer, and I have no idea who I am anymore." And once you start to have ears to hear, the vocalizations or the words that people use that give signal that they're looking for something deeper in their life, you start to hear it. And after that, we started hearing it in other study participants. My clinical partners would comment to me about things that their patients would say, like, "I don't know what to do with my second chance. I don't want to go back to the life I had, but I don't know what calls me." Or oftentimes people would cloak it in a little bit of an apology or embarrassment and say, "I have no right to complain. I
Yeah.
have a roof over my head. I'm doing better, but I have no idea what to do now. And I found that so compelling because those are human questions. They're not disability questions, they're not illness questions. They are the big questions about living a full life that are provoked by those major transitions in life. So, anywho, I'm taking all of this in. I'm noticing all of this with other people. I'm noticing how it relates to my human questions. And then I turn to the literature, which is so compelling that this is not a champagne problem, that having a sense of purpose in our life not only contributes to fulfillment and life satisfaction and flourishing, it's important to our health. And so that was kind of a big aha. And I will just go on to say, Melissa, that I spent 45 years working for a large healthcare system in various roles, but Holy Toledo. And I knew what called me, and it was this work. I also knew that my employer was not going to pay me to develop a purpose in life renewal intervention. Not bloody likely. That, the kinds of things that healthcare organizations really have to concern themselves these days are more around how many patients a provider can see and what is the most effective outcome towards discharge, these sorts of things. But purpose in life was not on the short list. So when it came to the Compass course, which is ultimately what my colleagues and I developed, this was outside of work. This was unpaid work. And I say that because I'm a believer in leaps of faith and sometimes doing illogical things when they just have your name written all over. And that's what we did. And we just had this crazy sense something would come of it. And sure enough, probably, I don't know, a few months after we had framed up and been continually, again, looking at what does the literature say, what would we do in the Compass course, I get an email from the director of cancer research in my large organization saying, we have a family that would like to donate money for a study related to breast cancer, and we need a proposal in 2 weeks. You got anything?
Wow.
Yes, I do. And that was the beginning of a number of funded studies around purpose renewal. So that's kind of a long story for your listeners. Sorry about that. But it kind of creates the context for most of what I have to say, is kind of where I started, the relevance to my life, even before I was formally working in this space. And like you said in your introduction, purpose does not time out when our employment ends. It does not. It does not need to.
Yeah.
And that's my assertion about my life now. So,
Yeah. Well, I think your story is so relevant because you are saying that you were doing this outside of work, and this kind of is your purpose, right? It's part of your purpose in life. So
yes,
you were able to find this not just within the employer itself, but to take a step out and say, how can I integrate this into the rest of my life?
that's true. And I will say, I hope that one of the threads of our conversation, Melissa, will have to see if we hit it, over the course of our time together, is oftentimes we know. We know what calls us. And the question is, you know, do we have the bravery to move on it in some small steps? And in my own experience, everything is small steps. Everything is small steps towards. And when we are able to take small steps towards that thing, the little voice, the little thing, we're on our way to something interesting.
Yeah, Definitely. So I know you mentioned a little bit about the scientific literature and how powerful that was in terms of even building out your Compass course. I'm curious to know if there's other things in the literature that you've seen that you want to share with people, because the last time you and I were talking about this, you said it's so interesting that the literature talks so much about the benefits of having purpose, but not so much about how to actually have purpose and live with your purpose.
That you got it. You were listening to me, Melissa. Thank you for that. But I want to say two things that I think are interesting vocabulary wise. You'll notice in our conversation, and it's true to form, I think, whenever you move into this space, people talk about purpose and meaning. And these two constructs sometimes are used interchangeably. And I often use them together because they're so similar and they relate to each other and are both important. But in general, purpose in life refers to having a set of life aims that motivate a person's daily pursuits, decisions, and resource use and provides a sense of direction. So when we think of purpose in life, we're looking at something that's prospective, goal-oriented, aspirational. Meaning in life in general, at least how we work with it, has to do with a person's retrospective appraisal of the extent to which their life makes sense and matters. So oftentimes we look at the meaning in our life by looking backwards. Something was meaningful. But when we think about purpose, we think about going forward. That's just kind of an important thing, even though you'll notice I use them together. When we talk about research, you have to be pretty clear, like, what are you measuring?
Yeah.
And so we aimed to measure primarily, could people move forward, have a sense of moving forward? This is just a high level from the literature, though, that I think sets the stage really well. And you can see why I get a little energized talking about this stuff. For one thing, purpose in life has been demonstrated to be associated with the lower risk of mortality, like dying, at all age groups. Most of the research has been on adulthood, but I did want to point out there's also been a lot of work on adolescence and how, especially, with late teenagers, that having a sense of purpose is associated with self-esteem, life satisfaction, lowering the risk of anxiety and depression, especially with girls. This is important. Then we start talking about adults and where a lot of this stuff comes from. There are some large longitudinal studies of adulthood that are underway at different universities where, they get a cohort, and we're talking thousands of people, and they follow them from the time they enroll till they die. And in some of them, they do, autopsies and all that stuff. And oftentimes, or there are a number of these that measure purpose in life at these junctures, and then they associate how do people rate their purpose and these health outcomes. So from those studies, they're demonstrating that people who endorse a sense of purpose live longer and they function better with age, both physically and cognitively. They are more engaged in health behaviors than people who do not have a sense of purpose, and they report greater levels of resilience. Now listen to this. Because of these health benefits, purpose in life is now considered to be a modifiable health risk factor. A modifiable health risk factor. So the whole notion of, one of my colleagues' patients talking about her lack of direction, lack of purpose as being a champagne problem, it is not. And further, only 1 in 5 high school students reports a clear sense of purpose. 1 in 3 college students reports a clear sense of purpose. And while purpose tends to increase until like middle adulthood, it plummets at 65 and older. my age.
Oh,
And I just told you these incredibly valuable health dividends as we age, feeling like I still have something to do here. Thank you very much.
yeah.
Um, and the fact that after age 65, people's sense of purpose plummets. I find that really disturbing. And then, like you said, there are very few interventions where purpose in life is the primary outcome. There are well being types of interventions for people, particularly in retirement, which is great. But there are multiple kinds of outcomes that they're measuring. It's very rare where purpose is the primary outcome. So, the one thing that I wanted to underscore is that in all of these studies that are coming together to say that this matters to your health, what they're looking at is self reported purpose, meaning, how do I think about my own life? It's not somebody judging me for how much TV I watch and saying, well, forget her, she's got no purpose. No, it's what do I think about my own life? And I thought it might be interesting, Melissa, to read to you a few of the items on what's called the Purpose in Life subscale of the scales of psychological well-being, because it just gives you a feel for what constitutes high levels of purpose in life. I'll read you, there's like 5 of them, but you can figure some of them are reverse score, but you can kind of get a sense of how might a high purpose person respond. I live life one day at a time, and I don't really think about the future. I have a sense of purpose and direction in life. My daily activities often seem trivial and unimportant to me. I don't have a good sense of what I'm trying to accomplish in life. I enjoy making plans for the future and working to make them a reality. Some people wander aimlessly through life, but I am not one of them. I sometimes feel as if I've done all there is to do in life. So again, some of those are reverse scores, but you kind of get a feel for, in these longitudinal studies, what are they sort of trying to capture in terms of a sense of purpose. The one final thing from the literature that I do want to point out is that even though there's not a real prescription, like what am I supposed to do specifically if I want to experience more purpose, there's not. There are ways that we can spend our time that when we do, we feel better about the purpose of our life, which again, in the end, is the only thing that matters. How do we feel about it? So when we do things that align with our sense of direction and our goals, we're reminded of the purpose in our life. When we do things that deeply align with our values and our strengths, we're reminded our lives have purpose. When we do things that reflect our true, authentic self, separate from societal expectation, good for us. We feel like our lives have purpose. When we do things we choose with intention, we feel like our lives have purpose. Also, that involves service, more so than pleasure, though pleasure is good, and creativity. So when we think about how might I spend my time that will remind me my life has purpose, it's thinking of those sorts of things.
That's so interesting. So, are there other misconceptions that you see around purpose?
Oh, you just touched a nerve there. Yes. The biggest one, and I see it all the time, is the phrase, find your purpose. I hate it. Let me tell you why I hate it. One, I don't like the verb find, and forgive me if I use it, but I might slip, but I hate that. And here's why. The suggestion is that to experience purpose in our life, we need to go on a hero's quest. We might fail. We may not find that little thing under the rock that's going to save our lives. I don't think of it that way. How I think of it is purpose is already here. It's sitting right there on the plate in front of us. And all we have to do is take a look. Take a careful look. It's right there already. So forget that find thing. I don't like find your purpose because it suggests we have just one. And oh boy, if you missed it, you get the wrong one. Too bad for you. I don't see it that way at all. And I think of it more like you and I were talking about a purpose portfolio. All of us have an array of things that could be, you could think of them as undertakings or projects or goal areas or roles. And I'd say right now I have about 6 that together they all matter to me. And I try to chip away at them. And together they put me in alignment with where my arrow points as to what a good life looks like. And so I am really enjoying that idea of a purpose portfolio, but forget this notion of find your singular purpose, good luck. So that's a big one. I think the other thing that is a misconception, I don't know if it's widely held, but I feel like there's this sense that purpose is for fancy people. People like Michelle Obama or, Melinda French Gates, who's got these important initiatives for women and that are doing really important work for the world. And that, yeah, those people, but not everyday people. And I couldn't argue with that more. I feel that what I do around my callings, where I derive purpose, are every bit as important as what Michelle Obama is doing, and same with you, Melissa. So that I disagree with. I also am very suspect of people who have a singular prescription for a one way you will find purpose. I just creep out at that. And it just irritates me because I'm sure that in their well-heeled prescription that's on sale at Amazon.com for $13.99, they've not studied it a bit. And the other thing that is really worth unpacking is the misconception that purpose is only based on what you do. It's all about what you do. Having a really a really important job, what you do. Having the great volunteer work, what you do. How much you got done in cleaning your basement, what you do. And I disagree wholeheartedly, and maybe I'm jumping ahead a little bit, but I'll just go ahead and do it. One of the foundations of the Compass course is the work of Dr. Viktor Frankl, who most people know was a Jewish physician who was imprisoned in the Nazi death camps. And he survived and wrote this extraordinary little book called Man's Search for Meaning that essentially captures how do we find meaning in the most base circumstances of life. And for people interested in deep personal growth, I highly recommend that book. But Dr. Viktor Frankl suggests, and again, we kind of transposed this and borrowed this a bit for the Compass course, but that we find purpose and meaning, yes, in what we do, but also what we savor, how we experience beauty, art, love, deep relationships, and thirdly, how we embody our deepest values by virtue of our attitudes. Doing, savoring, being a certain way based on our values embodied by our attitudes. This is really, really important because I think back to the research that we did on the Compass course. And Melissa, we did 5 small studies for women on the other side of breast cancer, people with long haul COVID, and people with persistent symptoms after a concussion. All of these participants could not do what they hoped, They did not know if they could continue to do what they had planned, but their lives continued to hold profound purpose, not only just in the things they could do, but how they could be expanded to deriving purpose by simply savoring the things that brought them joy, the experiences that were right there in front of them, and how everyday activities could be shifted to purpose-rich activities by savoring beauty, joy, and love. And thirdly, by deciding the attitudes that were going to shape how they presented themselves in the world to others. So this notion that if I want to have a life of purpose, I have to exhaust myself. I have to be really busy. I have to get out there and conquer A, B, C, and D is not true. And we do not serve our own calling or our own lives by getting caught up in that. So there's a little sermon for today, Melissa.
I'm glad that you mentioned the Compass course because I was going to ask you about that next. Can you tell us a little bit more about that and how that helps people identify some of the purpose in their life that's, as you said, already there, but they just have to
Yes.
uncover it?
Yes. So as I mentioned, we developed the Compass course outside of work. It involves 8 sessions, and because this was born from a group of clinicians and researchers, it was really important to tether as much of it as possible to theoretical literature, to scientific literature. But it is composed of 8 group conversations over 2.5 months. And I'm not really trying to plug this because I'm not selling anybody on anything, but I would like to just say if you're interested in learning more, Melissa mentioned there's a choosingpurpose.com website that I use for my own creative outlets on purpose, and a tab on the Compass course, which includes a little button that takes you to a conversation with my daughter and me about purpose. And I'm only saying this to you publicly and you listeners at home because I fixed that website up and I have no computer skills. But I just give myself so much credit for that and joy in learning. One of my values is learning stuff. In any case, there's a lot more about the Compass course if you're interested. But here's the skinny. And I want to kind of give you the outline of the Compass course because I think it does frame a way to renew a sense of purpose. At our first session, we talk about transitions and how transitions are episodes in life that oftentimes bring us to the big questions and try to normalize that a little bit. We spend 3 sessions trying to help people reconnect with their inner compass. And we think of their inner compass as kind of the guts of the matter, our values, our strengths, and our sources of personal meaning. What are those? What are those top 6 in each of those categories now? So that's really where purpose begins. I don't care if it's purpose at work. I don't care if it's purpose when you retire. It all begins with the guts of our inner compass and what's up right now with the life I have, the person that I am. So that's what we spend time doing over 3 sessions. Then we use that information to help people frame up a purpose statement. And I know that's scary. People don't like to write the words down about this is where I go. But it's important. Then we spend on our 6th session taking that and developing a purpose plan. Because all the aspirational things in the world will only get us so far. We actually might, doggone it, have to do something or change something or make different choices. So the plan frames up our best intentions. The 7th session is around purpose practices. Like, what are the things we might add to our daily lives or take away from our daily lives that will help us to choose on purpose? And then finally, we take a 1 month application break between the 7th session and the 8th. And it really is not a rest. It's meant to be, get used to doing this on your own. And then we come together for the last session and really talk about how do you keep this up as kind of a habit of mind. And one of the things I do want to clarify that I think is really important, I wanted to get this right so I've got a little note here, Melissa. But in the Compass course, we're very deliberate in that we focus on purpose in daily life. Daily life is where it happens. And I want to just read you our definition of purpose in daily life. I can't seem to find it, but I'll give it to you from my best memory. Purpose in daily life has to do with making choices in the moments of our day to use our time and energy in ways that align with our inner compass, our values, our strengths, and our sources of personal meaning. And we really love the concept of purpose in daily life because it shifts it away from the big abstract, my purpose, on and on and on, and says, you got this day. How can I make choices in this day that align with who I most honestly am and the direction that calls me in this day? All of us can do that. And I will say, some days are better than others. It's not like you got to go ape crazy here. And it's like, I got to fill my life. I got to fill my life with every minute. I can't watch Netflix. No. And we did a study, or we looked at data from one of our studies as to how many purpose choices people made in a day. The intentional action or time use that aligns with their inner compass. And most of the time we're talking 2, So it's not like we have to fall off the edge of the world or exhaust ourselves. But there is a sense of integrity that comes from choosing in alignment with our own direction. So anyway, I want to say a couple of things about, what are the dividends of the Compass course? And I'm quick to say we haven't done a randomized control trial. And where you can really establish causation is where some people get it, some people don't, and you look at the difference. So I have a colleague who's inching towards that, but that we have not done or published those yet. But one of the things we found is, number one, people liked it. And one of the things they liked is the chance to talk to other people about purpose. Because I'm telling you, I don't know about your friends, Melissa, my friends don't talk about it. And I remember one of the young women at session 8, when I did the Compass course at a community organization for people with cancer, and she said, I don't know who I'm going to talk with about this when it's over. So people really, even the introverts like moi, they really gained a lot from talking about such a deep topic with other people who are interested in it too. Our own sense is that in terms of outcome of the Compass course, these are some of them. 1, people kind of learn a vocabulary to talk about purpose. And I do think that's one of the difficulties in our conversations with other people. We don't exactly know what we're talking about or what it might mean to someone. So having a vocabulary was helpful. I would say some people made some big life changes, not many, but some people, and it was rather frightening to us as investigators. It's like, you quit your job, you moved. But where people did see this just complete disconnect between their inner compass and some other big part of their life, some people made some changes. What really pleased me, though, is how many people saw the purpose that was already there. That's why I was saying before, it's not some thing to go find on a treasure hunt. It's right there. For example, people reframed things like, I remember this young woman saying how bath time became a purpose choice with her kids. It was not this thing to rush through. It was this moment to have fun, take a good look at their children. So that was, people talked about, this is kind of crazy, but taking out the garbage because it was an act of love for their family. So I'm saying that was the most profound and almost universal experience, is people seeing their own lives different. And so that I find to be really lovely. What I can say in terms of kind of our before and after, our pre-post, for people who did not endorse a sense of purpose, direction before the Compass course, they generally did at the end. And I share this with you, Melissa, because I think it's kind of interesting. We made up, and we've done 5 of these studies, so we used the screener question a lot and then looked at the results a lot. But we made up this thing called the purpose status question. And it says, related to living with purpose in life, right now, I am moving backwards, stalled, figuring it out, or moving forward on a path. For people that answered that question, moving backwards or stalled, they almost universally moved into something with movement, figuring it out, moving forward on a path. And we started to use that screener question to make sure that in our studies, actually, we had at least half of the participants who were moving backwards or stalled, in order to see if we could detect change. So I think that's an interesting little question, and maybe one we can ask ourselves. Moving backwards or feeling stalled in our lives, this would be a time to invest. This does not have to be that way.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Mary, I love your approach to this because it really, I think, gives the power back to the individual. And sometimes we tend to think of like all of these external factors at play, right? Like I see in my own work that a lot of people put a lot on the employer and say like, oh, it's the employer's job to give me purpose or to give me wellness or whatever it is,
yes, yes,
right?
yes. And that's a really good point. And I think, I know that I love the title of your podcast, by the way, but I know that one of your focus areas is on the world of work. And I think that's a interesting, a little bit dicey space for purpose. And I think in an ideal world, we spend our time at work doing work that we find meaningful. Remember, meaning having to do with, it adds to our coherence and mattering, and maybe aligns with larger goals that we have for ourselves, maybe. And I feel like looking back over a 45-year career, in general, at least half the time, I would say that how I spent my days fell into, a realm of meaning and purpose. But I happen to feel it's really dangerous to put all of our meaning and purpose demands in our jobs, because, as I'm sure anyone who has worked for more than 1 year can tell you, there are days, there are months, there are stretches where the job does not love you back. And that is how it is. And we can still live with purpose. We can actually still live with purpose in the context of our job. Even when, okay, we go there, we're grateful for a paycheck, it feeds other aspects of roles that are important to us in terms of paying for the things we care about and supporting our family. So don't disregard that as purpose rich in and of itself. But there are times when, the substance of the job may not feed our longer term goals. And my suggestion, and I guess I'm truthfully borrowing a suggestion from others, has to do with what's called job crafting. So taking, and you probably know more about this than me, Melissa, but kind of taking certain aspects of the job and trying to transpose them in a way that they become important and even uplifting. And some examples, I think this is where Frankl's notion of savoring certain things. For example, in my job as an occupational therapist, there were so many pressures around how much I had to get done in a short amount of time. That didn't feed my purpose. But being with a person, doing what I could for a certain amount of time to just be present to them or really listen or see what I could learn from what they were telling me, that did. I have a colleague who's a really fun person, and she just brings a lot of light and joy and humor, and that's part of her shtick, part of her purpose. And I know that there were times where her job didn't love her back. But she found a way to bring these other aspects of her values to her coworkers, and she did it intentionally. So what I'm trying to say is that it does come back to us. And not only, is it not our employer's responsibility to give us purpose? I'm suspect of when they think they are. Maybe it's, again, 45 years of working in a large healthcare system, but it's like, what else you got? What's your secret behind the curtain there? Because I know what the organization's goals are, and it really is not entirely my fulfillment.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
getting some objectives met. So let's not confuse the matter here. So
Yeah.
yeah, I believe that as much as we can empower ourselves to know what it is we're here to do, and to make the choices that work. We got a job to do. We got to get paid. We like the money. We're maybe have some sights on what comes next. Good, but we're going to be in charge of the choices we make around what calls us.
Yeah, and there's so much I think that's interconnected in this because I can even go back to something you said much earlier in the conversation where you were saying that when people are intentionally choosing how to use their time, that fosters their sense of purpose and fulfillment.
Yes, it
And
does.
that also goes into, I think, the idea of something like job crafting, right? Like we actually have control, maybe not over the entire job, but over
Right.
small pieces where even if it feels like a situation that's maybe not ideal, we might be able to kind of craft it in a way that it becomes okay for us and we don't have to throw it all away and completely look for a new job.
I think that's so true. And to adopt kind of a learning framework, that is to say, okay, this is not my be all and end all. I don't plan to do this forever. But what are the things, if learning is a value to you, and it's one of mine, what are the things I can learn here that might actually be small steps towards the future that I envision. So, and I'm really glad that you kind of hooked into that notion of this choosing and intentionality. Because Melissa, if I were to say, what's kind of the upshot? What's kind of the upshot for what it means to live a life of purpose? I think it has to do with, again, having done the homework to honestly reflect on where does my inner compass point, and to acknowledge the guts of my inner compass are likely to be very different from yours. And to find that acceptable, to find sort of the autonomy to move off of that, and the bravery to take small steps, make small daily choices that are in alignment with what I know to be true for me. And I think it was like Annie Diller who said something like, I probably got that wrong, sorry, but I think it's her, who said something like, how we spend our day is, of course, how we spend our life. That these choices to create a day, even pockets of a day, are how we form our lives. I would also add that's probably not so much in your community, but I think a lot of this fits for after retirement too. because you don't have an employer that's telling you what to do. And you have a society that tells you you don't need to do a damn thing.
Yeah.
And that, thank you very much, your services are no longer needed. And I'm here to say that's not true for me. But it requires that my self-defined purpose, I act on it all by myself. And oftentimes without, well, certainly without a paycheck, but also without the societal frame that makes that kind of behavior normal. So it's an interesting challenge, I think, that we all face at different parts of life if we choose to live with purpose for the entirety.
Well, and that's so interesting because I think that that aligns with not only something like retirement, but something like a period of unemployment. So if you're going
Right.
through like a job transition, you're not currently working, a lot of the time we have lost part of our sense of purpose and our structure in life and all of the things
I
that
know.
kind of make it easier.
It is. And I think the most difficult, well, I mean, there are many, many hard things about that. But if you had a deadline, if you could just know when does this period of fallow end, it would make it so much easier. If even if it was like, I won't find another job for a year. Okay, a year. I've got 12 months. Then I'm going to do this. And I believe it was in Man's Search for Meaning that he talked about kind of a provisional life. This where you don't know when the next step comes and how especially difficult that is. But I do think that the frame of purpose as what you do, what you savor, the attitudes you embody can also create that framework for difficult periods like that. And I will say, Melissa, the topic is worth investing in because we all have hard stretches of life. We all have beautiful stretches of life, but the way it is in reality is everyone hits the skids, whether it's going to be health, whether it's going to be, employment issues that we do not choose. And I can only say from my own experience, having bumped into all those things, that being grounded in what matters most, being grounded in my values, my strengths, my sources of personal meaning has really been helpful in weathering those things. Because even at times when I have not known what the future holds, I have really truly not been able to predict or have some grand long-term aspiration because I haven't known. I can know today. I can know what I am about today. And in small ways, I can still choose. And so, without being kind of a Debbie Downer here, everyone's going to have something bad happen. But the truth of it is that is life. And if we have done the homework to ground ourselves in having a self-grounded sense of purpose, we'll be better able to weather those times with the kind of integrity that, most of us aspire to.
Do you have any small steps that someone can take right now to start to get a better understanding of their own purpose and start to incorporate that more into their life intentionally?
Well, I do. I would invite you, I guess this is my sense. We don't fall backwards into purpose. We really don't. We might by chance or by some synchronicity encounter something where we have some kind of an aha. But living with purpose involves some kind of an investment, whether that's 5 minutes a day, whether it's a longer period of self-study. My point being is if you're a person that kind of can feed growth through reading, I have a couple of thoughts. One, as I mentioned before, I have this website and a newsletter called Choosing Purpose. And I write things that, I don't know, they're interesting to me and that reflect one person's efforts to live this way, and also research. And there's no ads. It's free. If that interests you, check it out. I also do recommend reading Man's Search for Meaning. I think what I come away from that book is this notion that if this guy can frame up meaning in the most base of human circumstances, well, then there's probably a little hope for my annoyances and hassles in daily life. There's another author that I'm like, I probably have read most of what the guy has ever written. His name is Dr. James Hollis, Hollis. And he's a Jungian analyst. And I'm going to read you some of the titles that are just sitting across from me. He has a book called What Matters Most. He has a book called A Life of Meaning. A book called Living an Examined Life. Another one, On This Journey We Call Our Life. You could pick any of those. What I really like about this guy is some of these books are like really skinny, which isn't the point, but they're deep and thought-provoking. And he does not offer simplistic, do these 3 things. He really speaks to the complexity of life, and I find myself deeply moved, and he gives me a lot to think about. So if you're looking for a book like that you just want to nibble on, you could do some reading. I pulled out a few things from the Compass course, Melissa, that relate to exercises that kind of help unpack a person's inner compass. The first thing relates to our current values. And this, I think, is kind of a fun thing for everybody. There is a survey. It's called Values in Action. Values in Action Character Strength Survey, that was originally developed by 2 of the heavy hitters in the field of positive psychology. One of them is Martin Seligman. Anyway, you go and take this test online, and you have to say, okay, I give the cookies permission or whatever. But it sends you back your top 24 character strengths. And it's really an interesting thing to do, where you kind of look and say, well, would I agree with that? So that really relates to character strengths. Something that we do that is just sort of a self-reflection exercise having to do with values. So think about a time when you march to the beat of your own drum. Maybe describe it or journal about it or something like that. And then look back and say, what values are reflected in that experience? So that's kind of values. The third thing, it has to do with sources of personal meaning. What are the kinds of endeavors that feel really meaningful to you? So for that exercise, we have a thing we call a perfect day. So the first, and again, this would be like a little thing you'd journal or you'd write about. Describe an ideal 24 hours where you can do what you want, all obstacles removed. So think about that. And now describe an ideal 24 hours with the realities of life in place. And look at those things in your ideal day and see what it tells you. Like, how are they composed? With what? And what does that tell you about where you find meaning?
Thank you for sharing those. I know you mentioned your blog on your website. Is there anywhere else people can follow you if they want to learn more or they want to get your latest updates?
People can sign up for a newsletter. And that's where I am putting things like when we're going to offer the Compass course next. I do plan to give it a run. So if that is, of interest to people, that would be where you could sign up for the newsletter. I took a big break with much of the work on my website over the last 10 months with when a family member of mine was seriously ill with cancer. But, and that's really what I was sort of alluding to before, where I was so thankful that during this space where my life felt scary and constricted, that I still had a grounding. But I'm really moving back to the purpose work. As you know, Melissa, I'm really excited about training other people to do the Compass course because it's just a real joy to have these kinds of conversations with people and to equip people to think more deeply about the value of their own lives.
Excellent. Those will be linked in the show notes for anyone looking for that, so you can easily find it. And do you have any last words of wisdom or anything you want to make sure people take away from our conversation today?
I do, Melissa. I think if you were to take away anything, it's that having a sense of purpose is important to a full life. And if you've not spent time thinking about it, your life is so worth it. And what your unique constellation of what purpose looks like for you is not only a source of fulfillment for you, but I happen to believe it's a contribution to the rest of us. And honestly, I imagine a brigade of people who really invested in living with authentic purpose and what that would look like. What that would look like in the contribution of others, in the joyful countenance of others. So that, I guess, would be my charge, is that taking time to consider what your own self-grounded purpose in life might look like, and taking those daily brave steps that align all by yourself. It matters. It matters for your well-being, and frankly, it matters for the rest of us too. So that's my word of encouragement.
Great. Thank you, Mary. I know this is a topic that we could go on forever about. So this kind of scratches the surface, but hopefully it gets everyone interested in learning more and exploring some of those resources that you mentioned. So thank you so much for being here.
Well, Melissa, I just want to say thank you for thinking to invite me. It's just been an absolute pleasure, and it's brought me back into, a space I haven't fully inhabited in doing this kind of thing for a little while, and it has reminded me just how much I enjoy it. So thank you, Melissa, for thinking of me and taking that small step to invite me.
Of course. All right. Thanks, Mary.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye. If you love this podcast, be sure to hit subscribe, leave me a review, and share it with a friend so we can help more high-performing misfits find work they love. See you next time.